On live television, Dr. Lauren Brooks's urgent tornado warning was brushed aside, leaving an entire city unaware of the danger above. Anchor Tom Henderson's polished dismissal turned her plea into a moment of public humiliation. But the storm had its own timing, forcing Lauren to act without permission and take control of the broadcast. And just wait until you hear how her bold move changed everything, and why justice in the end came through with stunning force. The city was just starting to wake. The first buses rumbled through rain-damp streets. Traffic lights flickered over wet intersections, and coffee shop windows glowed against the early morning haze. In the glass tower that housed Channel 8 News, staff moved briskly through polished corridors towards another live broadcast. Today's schedule promised celebrity interviews and cheerful neighborhood reports, designed to soothe viewers into the workday. But not everyone in the building felt calm. Dr. Lauren Brooks sat alone at her station, the pale blue light from her computer screen casting stark shadows across her face. Storm data scrolled endlessly before her eyes. Wind shear, falling barometric pressure, a sudden collision of warm and cold fronts just west of the city. On her desk lay a folder thick with printouts, every page marked with urgent notes and circled figures. Each new update tightened the knot in her stomach. Lauren had studied storms since graduate school. She knew the difference between a passing front and a true disaster brewing. The production team called her upstairs just minutes before airtime. Lauren gathered her folder and hurried to the studio, weaving through a small crowd of technicians who barely glanced up. Tom Henderson, the station's longtime anchor, stood near the news desk adjusting his earpiece and grinning at something a producer had said. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man whose word was always trusted, a household name in the city. Lauren's entrance was met with a sideways glance from Tom. His expression barely shifted as she set her papers on the desk and began to brief him. "There's something unusual out there," she said, voice steady but urgent. "The models this morning. They're all pointing to a supercell. Tornadic activity, not just a routine system. Meteorologically, this is extreme." Tom glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. "You know viewers panic easily. We want people to feel safe, not scared. Let's keep it simple. Just the basic forecast. Save the emergency alerts for the government." Lauren hesitated, forcing her voice lower. "This isn't routine. We need to warn people. I think we're facing a high risk of an EF5 tornado. If it tracks east and touches down, the city could suffer catastrophic damage." A nervous producer interrupted. "We're live in 1 minute. Tom, you're leading. Dr. Brooks, just summarize the basics, please." The warning was clear. Keep it light. Keep it short. As the red recording light blinked on, Tom began with the morning headlines, voice perfectly modulated for comfort and authority. "Good morning, Chicago. Today's weather looks mild, with scattered showers and some windy gusts later. Now for our forecast, here's Dr. Lauren Brooks." Lauren stepped forward, papers in hand, meeting the gaze of millions behind the lens. She explained the specific wind patterns, pressure drops, and supercell risk. Yet every time her words edged into warning territory, Tom interjected, turning her statements into jokes or deflections. "Sounds like science fiction, folks. A superstorm in the middle of October." Tom smiled, hoping viewers would join in his optimism. "I think we'll be safe. Maybe just a little rain. If you see a flying cow, call us." The studio staff chuckled, some shaking their heads. Lauren pushed on, her voice growing tense. "I urge everyone to prepare. Review your emergency plans. Seek shelter if local authorities advise it. The data." But Tom had already taken back control, pivoting to a crowd-pleaser story about a local bakery. Viewers watched, reassured by his familiar demeanor. Behind the scenes, Lauren's face fell. When the segment ended, she stared at her notes, heart pounding. Every page, the wind speeds, the temperature jumps, the unmistakable path on the radar pointed to imminent danger. But these warnings had vanished behind Tom's offhand remarks. The post-broadcast routine continued as usual. Tom greeted fans on social media. Producers reset the studio for the next live segment. Lauren lingered at her desk, sending urgent emails to city emergency officials, hoping someone would listen. Her colleagues passed by with polite nods, too busy to notice the desperation in her eyes. Outside, the city remained blissfully unaware. Parents walked children to school. Joggers traced familiar paths beside Lake Michigan, and business people hurried to catch trains. Darkening clouds gathered far outside the cityscape, heavy with potential, but no one bothered to glance up. In the Channel 8 break room, laughter echoed against the glass, drowning out the sound of distant thunder. Lauren watched the skies from her office window, wishing the warning could reach beyond the studio walls. As the day unfolded, she clung to hope that someone would recognize the signs, but the silence inside the newsroom felt immovable, and outside the storm was closing in. Afternoon settled over the city, wrapping the skyscrapers in a gray veil that stole the usual sparkle from lakefront windows. As the streets bustled with workers retreating for lunch and children spilling out of schools. Inside Channel 8, Lauren Brooks paced the carpeted hallway outside the weather office, her heartbeat echoing with every hurried step. The rejected warning weighed heavily in her mind. Each moment that passed without action felt like both a failure and a test of resolve. She paused by a row of monitors tracking the storm front, watching animated lines bend and twist over real-time satellite images. Every frame displayed an accelerating pattern, turbulent air currents veering low, dew point climbing, storm rotation, tight and fast. Lauren could read the language of clouds and pressure like music, sensing a chorus of danger where others heard only white noise. Frustration surged inside her. This was not the time to wait for protocol, and yet protocol was all anyone seemed to care about. In the common area, the newsroom staff joked over pastries and coffee, trading gossip about guests and segments. Tom Henderson had become the center of attention, recounting the morning broadcast as comic relief. She was ready to issue an apocalypse. That's what graduate school does to people. He chuckled, shielded by his reputation and the easy camaraderie of colleagues who trusted him above all. Lauren slipped past the laughter, her focus narrowed to getting her data into the hands of someone who would act. At her desk, she drafted messages to the National Weather Service and City Emergency Management, each email more urgent than the last. Significant rotation, she wrote, potential for EF5 touchdown within hours. Words that should have prompted alarms, but instead faced silence or bureaucratic form responses, thanking her for her contribution. The city itself mirrored the newsroom's indifference. At street level, commuters glanced at phones for weather apps, showing only mild warnings, a little rain, maybe some wind. Neighborhood groups posted photos of clouds, joking about the dramatic sky and speculating over the chance of a late fall thunderstorm. In living rooms, televisions replayed the morning segment. Most watchers remembered Tom's reassuring tone, not the note of warning in Lauren's voice. Her resolve hardened as she saw the first line of thunderheads crawling towards the city from the southwest, a signature visible only to those who understood its threat. Lauren found herself thinking of her childhood in Oklahoma, where storms could spawn from blue skies with terrifying speed. She remembered how her mother would read the wind, alert neighbors, urge everyone into safe rooms long before sirens sounded. It was knowledge born from experience, something Lauren carried into her work, even as the world around her preferred comfort over caution. In a last attempt to break through official channels, Lauren placed a direct call to the city's Emergency Operations Center. The operator listened politely, but dismissed her urgency. "We follow published guidelines, Dr. Brooks. We've heard nothing from the government. If conditions escalate, we'll act accordingly." The words were steady, procedural, devoid of the fear she felt growing by the minute. Lauren's frustration blended with regret, and she wrestled with doubt. Should she bypass protocol altogether? Should she risk her reputation to reach the public directly? Consequences be damned? She thought of the thousands living in houses of glass and steel, families with children playing in basements and yards, completely unaware of the danger pressing closer. She realized the failure to act could haunt her long after the skies cleared. An hour later, another red band appeared on the radar. Unexpected. Violent. Lauren took to her office window, watching as clouds thickened and birds vanished from sight. She pressed her palm against cool glass and made a silent vow. She would not wait for approval. She would use every channel available, every tool she had, to warn whoever would listen. Back in the studio, Tom fielded calls from city officials, still confident, dismissing rumors of imminent risk. Yet even he could not ignore the rising wind, the way sunlight vanished behind a deepening wall of clouds. With each passing minute, the balance of certainty shifted, first in Lauren's favor, then, in a rush of uneasy realization, to everyone around her. By late afternoon, Lauren burst into a quiet conference room, interrupting a meeting with producers. She spoke with conviction, unraveling storm models on the screen, tracing the path of destruction forming outside. Her voice carried the urgency Tom never allowed on air. If we act now, we can save lives. I'm asking you to trust the science. The moment hung in the air, tension palpable. Some faces revealed fear, others disbelief, still others pride stung by challenge. The city beyond the glass tower remained oblivious, for now, but Lauren had planted the truth in their midst. Whether they listened was uncertain, but the storm was no longer a distant threat. It was here, moving, ready to test the resolve of anyone willing to stand against convention and speak for those who had no warning. The sky outside growled, and Lauren knew the time for pleading was over. She steeled herself to do something no protocol permitted, to break the silence, to risk everything on the hope that someone, anyone, would hear her before it was too late. Evening settled with an unsettling hush. At first, most people in Chicago didn't notice the subtle change, a deeper shade moving across the cloud banks, a sudden stillness in the wind. The city's energy had slowed, conversations quieted beneath streetlights, and neighbors glanced at the sky more often, noticing shapes in the clouds they couldn't explain. Inside his apartment overlooking the city, Tom Henderson prepared to leave for a late dinner. He glanced at the television, which replayed cheerful features and underestimated forecasts. But as Tom reached for his coat, a strange vibration rattled his windows, followed by a low rumble, deep and continuous. He paused. On the far horizon, a dark wall was rising. He pulled out his phone, flipping through local weather alerts, still nothing unusual, just the same mild warnings he'd passed along that morning. As the sky deepened to near black, Lauren Brooks was still at Channel 8. She sat at her workstation, working the phones and scouring additional radar sites for confirmation of her fears. Each scrape of static or missed call increased her anxiety, but her sense of obligation overpowered frustration. Then the alerts she'd waited for appeared one after another, meteorological codes and urgent red banners flashing from neighboring counties, already feeling the storm's grip. Lauren acted. Without waiting for further approval, she pushed through the studio doors, calling over the few remaining staff. Her voice was low but urgent. "We go live now. Patch me into broadcast skip the segment rotation. This is not a drill." The technical crew hesitated only a moment, drawn by the authority in her tone and the conviction in her eyes. The cameras swung toward her, studio lights flooding the set with artificial day as she took the anchor's chair. She spoke slowly at first, then faster as the first flashes of lightning lit the skyline beyond the window. If you are within the city or surrounding counties, shelter immediately. This is a high-category tornado system EF5 conditions indicated by live and national data. Do not wait. Go to your lowest floor, avoid windows, protect your family. Households across Chicago, now distracted by the growing storm, flicked through channels searching for answers and landed on Lauren's broadcast, her calm but insistent words crackling through televisions and radios, crossing the city's neighborhoods and high-rises. Meanwhile, Tom's phone rang with an unfamiliar urgency. Newsroom colleagues and city officials now all in panic. He stared out over the cityscape, watching as what looked like a massive spinning tail descended from the darkness, its form illuminated by the flicker of distant lightning. Realization came sharply. Lauren hadn't been overreacting. She was right. And in his heart, a pang of regret bloomed. He dialed the studio directly. Lauren answered, breathless but composed on air. There was no room for pride or hesitation now. Tom's authoritative voice joined hers on the emergency broadcast, reading Lauren's instructions verbatim and urging viewers to stay safe, repeating the call to action again and again, with all the certainty he could muster. Out in the city, families hurried into basements, neighbors sheltered together in parking garages and subways. Emergency phone trees began to activate. The wind's pitch changed, the rumble grew, and then the city braced for impact. Back in the studio, Lauren guided the broadcast like a captain steering through a storm, her tone resolute yet compassionate. She answered panicked calls live, repeated safety measures, translated scientific jargon into clear, direct instructions. Around her, the usual chaos of the newsroom had melted into purposeful silence. Every staffer understood the gravity of the moment. Even Tom, once skeptical and dismissive, deferred to Lauren's expertise, amplifying her directions with unwavering support. Outside, as the system swept through, the broadcast stayed live. The two former adversaries united in urgency as the city weathered a test of fortitude, luck, and leadership. And through all of it, Lauren didn't let herself hope for thanks or apologies. Her focus was solely on protecting as many people as possible, her calm voice cutting through the noise as Chicago faced the storm, head on. Dawn broke with an unfamiliar stillness. The city that never truly slept now seemed to pause, as if the world itself was waiting for permission to exhale. Across Chicago, streets were littered with splintered wood and scattered debris, while morning sunlight revealed the aftermath buildings stripped of windows, uprooted trees lined in silent tribute, traffic lights dangling like ornaments in the gentle breeze. The skyline, though battered, endured. The air, sharp and charged, carried the scent of renewal and something even stronger: survival. Dr. Lauren Brooks had barely closed her eyes. She remained at the Channel 8 studio through the night, keeping the emergency broadcast on air as long as service allowed. After the final storm bands rolled east, she sat quietly by the window, watching rescue vehicles zigzagging along unfamiliar routes. She felt each distant siren as a reminder of what could have happened had her warning never aired. Messages began to stream into the station: relief, thanks, and disbelief. Families called to say how, because of the sudden live broadcast, they moved to their basements just in time. Shelter supervisors reported crowding minutes before the tornado struck, lives preserved by instincts guided by one clear, insistent voice. Authorities tallied the numbers. Thousands of injuries prevented. Neighborhoods spared the worst. Nearly 47,000 people who found safety because they'd listened when it mattered most. Lauren read these messages in the dim light of the studio, tears prickling her eyes, not from exhaustion, but from overwhelming relief. Later that morning, she received a call to meet with the station management. Lauren walked through the main hallway, passing colleagues who now watched her with respect that felt both long overdue and brand new. Tom Henderson waited at the glass doors, no longer the picture of steady perfection, but weary, humbled, his eyes reflecting gratitude more powerful than words. He didn't reach for the spotlight. Instead, he quietly thanked her. His handshake was steady, his apology unspoken, yet clear in the lingering silence between them. Management greeted her in the conference room, where discussion moved quickly from routine protocol to the reality that her decision had saved the city's people. They asked about her methods, her insights, her willingness to break the silence when others waited. The tone was no longer dismissive, but open a recognition of her expertise, initiative, and courage. She was invited to head a new division for severe weather response, her authority in such emergencies now established without question. Outside, as the city's daily rhythms resumed with cautious optimism, Lauren took a solitary walk along the lake. She reflected on all those years spent fighting to be heard, nights spent poring over maps and data, determined to prove that warnings in science were not just technicalities, but matters of deepest responsibility. Each wave lapping the shore seemed to echo the quiet truth. Even in the face of doubt, a single voice can change the fate of thousands. News of what unfolded that night spread quickly beyond Chicago. Clips from Lauren's impromptu emergency broadcast taught new protocols at other stations. National meteorological agencies cited her resolve as a model for future decision-making. In classrooms, students watched the footage as a testament to courage and expertise. In homes she would never see, people remembered the night they listened to the woman who would not be silenced, the one whose warning saved a city. For Lauren, there were no celebrations or grand speeches. She chose instead to return to her work, driven by the same sense of duty that made her voice the one that rose above the storm. When she looked out over the city, it was with quiet conviction, a knowledge born from challenge that next time the clouds gathered, she would always be ready.